Hey, what's going on, guys? It's Turin here with another Warhammer Total War online commentary. In this particular battle, I'll be playing the Empire, and I'm going to be facing off against the Wood Elves, so definitely time to party, guys. So as far as my composition goes, I have a front line of swordsmen, so these guys I feel like are a pretty cost-effective choice in this matchup. I'm actually going to go ahead and pause it, because this battle actually starts pretty quickly with all his ranged units, and I don't want you guys to miss any of the action. So these guys are pretty solid. They have 36 melee attack, when buffed, of course, and 36 melee defense. Also, they're shielded. Granted, their armor is quite low, so they can take quite a bit of damage from that missile fire, but still, for how much you're paying, which is about, 400 resources, I feel like they're a pretty darn good choice against the Wood Elves. So when you compare their defensive and offensive stats against the Eternal Guard over here, obviously going to be a very typical choice. I actually have lower melee attack and lower weapon strength across the board, but they do have higher melee defense. So in terms of just kind of a raw engagement, it'll be a relatively even exchange, which is pretty good for how much you're paying for these swordsmen here. So I have a front line of swordsmen. Of course, Sigmar's sons are just aces in this matchup. They have a pretty high combat stats, actually. They have 43 melee attack, and they also have 30 weapon strike. So in that sustained combat, considering they don't break, they're going to be really, really good for you, in my opinion. In the secondary line, I have halberds. So these guys, obviously, the thing about the Wood Elves is they can have a pretty diverse spectrum of builds. So, again, if you just commit to all swords and go that route, you may get punished by, tree men and treekin and all that kind of funny business. But bringing a more well-balanced build, in my opinion, is the way to go. So I have a secondary line of halberdiers. They'll do good against the treekin. They'll do good against Durthu. Do very well at defending against cab and all that type of funny business. So also in the back, I do have some, I guess you could say shock infantry, because they do have a pretty substantial charge bonus, but I do have the Tattersouls. So these guys, if you're not careful, if you let them take missile fire, are just going to get cut to pieces with their 0 armor. So if you can get these guys engaged, they'll do pretty well at, cutting through the Wood Elf infantry. As Wood Elf infantry themselves, you guys see the Eternal Guards here, they actually only have 40 armor. So the high combat stats, the 40 weapon strength, the 39 charge bonus, and the 43 melee attack as it currently stands is going to be pretty darn good there. Of course, leading the charge, I do have VOLKMAR the Grim. So I actually like him here. He's really good because in this matchup, I feel as Empire, and what I've observed myself in playing Wood Elves against Empire, is a lot of the builds bring a lot of relatively low-tier Empire infantry, ranging from swordsmen to halberdiers and all those type of things. So the buffs that he provides over the course of the battle are going to be pretty good. And also on top of that, he does have a regeneration ability. So he does have that sustainability and can usually stay the course. Also, something else, he does do fire damage. So his melee attack, as you guys can see, if you look over there on the left side of the screen, he does do fire. So against the trees and all that kind of funny business, he's going to be hitting pretty hard. So definitely a fan of VOLKMAR, and let's see how he does. So the rest of my army, due to popular request, I did bring the Knights of the Blazing Sun. So I have 2 groups of those guys. Unfortunately for me, my opponent didn't really bring that many tree units. I mean, he does have the Dryads back here, but still, I mean, he has a very, very nice spear line here. He has some Eternal Guards on each side, so it's going to be very hard to get to these guys. Also, Durthu, he's probably just going to be hanging out among the infantry, so getting those cav in on Durthu is going to be a little bit tough, but we'll see how it goes. Supporting these Knights of the Blazing Sun, I have an Empire Captain here just for the leadership and extra oomph, and then on top of that, I do have a Light Wizard and a Bright Wizard. So the Light Wizard, I've actually probably played about 4 or 5 games as Empire against the Wood Elves, and I've had really, really good success with bringing the Light Wizard just with the nets. So, the Hagbane archers and the mobile, skirmishing, type units, you can net them down and simply ride them down. It works so well. I would recommend giving it a try, guys. And the Light Wizard, kind of tuned down like this with only this ability, he's actually pretty affordable. So on top of that, I also do have a Knight of the Blazing Sun. Not Knight of the Blazing Sun, a Bright Wizard. So the Bright Wizard provides the Flaming Sword of Ruin, which is going to be really solid with your infantry if they're engaged with the Dryads and other things like that. Also, Cascade and Fire Cloak is okay. I've been often considering not bringing it anymore because it isn't an AoE ability anymore. So it actually only targets a single target now. So not quite as good as it used to be, but still, it's worth considering. And I did bring Fireball as well. So that's it for my army. Let's go ahead and look at my opponent. So back here, he does have 2 deeply deployed Glade Riders. So this is exactly what I was talking about. The Glade Riders are very, very good skirmishers. They're very tough to deal with. And, having that net of Amnitalk on them is going to be pretty good if I can pull it off. So he has 2 of those. He also has some Eternal Guards with shields. Empire players will often bring like crossbowmen and things, so having the shields on these guys is a pretty good choice. And also the shield variants do have slightly higher melee defense, so even against swordsmen, it's a very, useful tool for only, 50 more gold that you're paying. So he has them in the wings, he has them on the far sides, and in the center he has 3 Glade Guards with Starfire Shafts. So these are the armor-piercing variants, so they'll do pretty well against, most of my, Knights of the Blazing Sun and things like that, and are a pretty good choice in my opinion. He also does have a Waystalker back here. He has Dryads on both sides with Branch Wraith. Of course, he has the healing ability and the Miasma, which is very, very good in my opinion. Let's see. Well, the ability isn't necessarily the best, but I'm saying the synergy. And usually when I bring the Branch Wraith, I like to bring the healing, the Earth Blood, as well as the Miasma, because it's only 5 damage, or not 5 damage, but 5 Winds of Magic, and it does pretty well for itself. He does have Durthu here. It looks like he has Wyson's Wild Form, which is now an AoE effect. I actually just learned that, relatively recently, so I'm going to be trying that out as well. And it looks like he has Flock of Doom, additional Glade Guards, or Eternal Guards over here, and some more Dryads. So without further ado, let's go ahead and get this battle started. It's going to be a fun one, guys. So right now I'm just kind of getting my Knights of the Blazing Sun, and usually what I do in most matchups is I'll try and ride around here and try and, feel the battlefield out, but my opponent uses his Waystalker over here. Gets a nice snipe, actually. He actually takes out 4 models with that single attack, so very well played on my opponent's part. Good use of that ability. And a lot of times I've made the mistake of often trying to hero snipe with it, but even using it against heavily armored elite troops like, Knights of the Blazing Sun, you can get pretty good value. So right now I'm trying to ride around and test my opponent out a little bit, see if he's going to react, and he does a very good job pulling these Eternal Guards back and protecting his flank, because obviously these Dryads would get just absolutely destroyed by the Knights of the Blazing Sun if he let me get a good charge in there. So just trying to feel it out and see what's going on, but in the meantime I am advancing my front line, and you can see his missile troops are just absolutely peppering these swordsmen. They're getting in there and doing some serious damage. They're down to 78 models from 90, about 65-70% HP, so definitely a tough situation, but thankfully swordsmen are relatively expendable. You guys might be wondering about the chevrons. I was just kind of a last-minute panic in the selection screen, but it actually wasn't terrible considering it gave him a bit of a nice stat boost there. But still down to 56 models. They're now shaken, and he's doing really, really well with his skirmishers here at the front line, so good on my opponent there. So here I'm trying to find a little bit of a niche to get in, so I actually decided to send my Empire Captain in here to shut this guy down, because he was doing a pretty good job. And I figured it would get in on his archers and would just disrupt some of these guys from shooting, so the Empire Captain, unfortunately, is probably just going to get the Wrath of Durthu here, which is not going to be fun. So he does use a nice Flock of Doom on my front line. You can see my troops are engaged, the Flagellants are in there, and they actually are doing pretty well against the Eternal Guard, but you can see you're taking pretty substantial casualties. But one thing that felt a little out of place this game was the Halberdiers. I couldn't quite find a good spot for them. They didn't seem to be doing the most, but still, my opponent does use the Mystifying Miasma as well to do a little bit of damage, and he's wearing down the Sigmar Suns, which is a very good decision. And still, he's doing very good defending his flanks with these spearmen, and I'm just trying to find a home for them. But as you can see, he comes back here. I get the Nets of Amnitok down on him. Now the Knights of the Blazing Sun are just going to feast. They're just going to get in here and skewer these elves here and send them back to the Shadow Realm. So it's going very, very well, and this is primarily why I wanted to show you guys this game, because I think this is a fairly viable tactic against the Wood Elves if you guys have been experiencing a lot of skirmishing and those type of things. I think it's going to be pretty useful. So I get a nice net here, and I'm able to just absolutely decimate those two groups. So they got very little value in, and they were able to just get rode off here. So it looks like they're both broken, not quite shattered, so they may come back, but still. In the front line, my opponent's faring much better. He was able to just completely decimate this group of swordsmen, and the rest of my infantry are kind of having a bit of trouble. You can see VOLKMAR in here is getting a little bit crunky, overextended, and some of these Halberdiers, I tried to get back onto Durthu, but he doesn't care. Friend or foe, he just gets in there with his big old sword and is whomping on people, but the Halberdiers, yeah, I'm able to push some of them through and get back, and you can see VOLKMAR charging in like a boss, but it's not going to go well for him. VOLKMAR, if he makes contact with Durthu, it's going to be bad if he actually gets some good hits on him. But the flame damage will be nice, and hopefully it'll add up over the course of the game. So my opponent does use the Lifeblood here, and I'm not sure where he actually used it. I think he used it on this front line over here. So you can see my swordsmen are actually starting to get worn down, and the Eternal Guards, it was a relatively close battle. But I believe that was the second Lifeblood my opponent used. So, again, it's really starting to turn the tide here. So very, very well played there. Some of my Halberdiers have gotten in, and you can see VOLKMAR using his bombardment ability, but still, I had to pull back. And you guys can see VOLKMAR took about 2 or 3 hits from Durthu, and he simply had to run. And, that was even with the Blazing Sun, not the Blazing Sun, but the Flaming Sword of Ruin on him as well. So very, very well played there. Thankfully, he did overcommit a little bit to the front line, so my Knights of the Blazing Sun were able to get back here and get on these Glade Guards, but they didn't do as much damage as I thought. I got a full charge in here, and you can see my heroic units, my Bright Wizard as well as my Light Wizard coming in here. And still, I'm getting a little bit of damage, but these guys are still fighting despite all that. I think that's largely due in part to this Waystalker being back here. He has pretty good, he does have encouragement, and he also has pretty good melee defensive. Not defensive, but melee capability, so doing pretty well for himself. But the Knights of the Blazing Sun, this is definitely a game-changing moment for me, but my opponent reacts very, very well and gets these Eternal Guards with shields back here, and they do have an anti-large bonus as well as armor piercing, so now that they're in there, they're probably going to get a few kills on these models and are definitely going to force me to pull out here. So let's go ahead and take a look. So the battle is kind of devolved in the front line, and just kind of this blob over here. You can see he has some Eternal Guards, about 25 models in that group, and I just have a bunch of swordsmen and halberdiers starting to work on Durthu, and it looks like VOLKMAR did indeed have to pull out. Let's see if we can find him. So Yeah, it looks like he was detached to deal with those Glade Riders over there and help them out, but they were able to, looks like, shatter them, so that's definitely a good situation. But still, Jerthu is such a force to be reckoned with. If you don't have, like, the missile fire or heavy, kind of heavy-hitting capabilities, and something I'd actually really like to try, and if you guys have tried it, is the Luminarch of Hysh. I'd like to try that against him, with that flame and that heavy hitting, and see how it does, but still, he's able to turn the tide, and you can see the only ones still fighting are the Tattersouls. A lot of these units, I should get them back shortly, but they did get terrified, so very, very well played there. So what I actually did is I used the Nets of Amnatok here on his main force because they were, repositioning and getting ready to come help. And I'm able to get the Knights of the Blazing Sun and all my other kind of flame units on Jerthu. And hopefully those attacks, though he does still have 100 armor, so that's going to mitigate a lot of the damage from the Knights of the Blazing Sun, but hopefully the kind of weakness to fire will help balance all that out. So right now I get a nice little surround on him, and you can see there's not many Wood Elf units, but Jerthu does use the Lamentation ability and gets a nice chunk, takes out a bunch of my units, and still he hits so freaking hard. He gets a great Flock of Doom as well, and is really starting to devastate this group. I can't quite burn him down. I was just pushing it so darn hard, and I still couldn't. He's definitely a linebacker. I think, the answer obviously is a lot of like missile fire and that type of stuff, as he is very, very durable. But VOLKMAR's in there, and these Knights of the Blazing Sun are trying to light him on fire, not having the most success despite the dry weather. And now the Eternal Guards have gotten out of their nets, so this is definitely going to be crunch time for both of us essentially. It's a very, very close game, very hard to tell which direction it's going to go. They're getting in here with their anti-large bonus, their armor piercing, and there's still so many of them. And also he still has a firing line of missile troops back here. Let's go ahead and see if they're out of ammunition. They're not actually, so they'll probably be firing into my Knights of the Blazing Sun with their armor piercing missiles. So a lot of his army is really coming together right now, and you can see Jerthu in here is periodically terrifying my units. They were actually just terrified, those guys, and they'll be back in shortly. You can see they're recharging in. I'm just trying everything I can to take out Jerthu, and I just can't seem to do it. You can see VOLKMAR in here. He did use the Faith's Bastion to give a 22% damage resistance buff to all my troops. I was hoping that would allow me to stay the course, and every second I'm in here fighting, I'm taking that heavy missile fire. Jerthu's laying the smack down, and you can see he turns the tide of the battle despite the fact that he's at what is that, I'm trying to see. Let's take a look here. So yeah, less than 10%. He actually only has 600 HP, and it looks like there's a mass terror route. So these units are either broken or terrified, and they're all running away. My Light Wizard's running away. VOLKMAR is running for his life right now, and it looks like he was trying to get a charge to take off this Waystalker right here, but wasn't able to. But he's pretty quick, actually. I decided to go with the speedier mount because I figured having that mobility would be useful. But thankfully, some Knights of the Blazing Sun were able to get back here and get on these Glade Guards. But the Glade Guards, they've been performing surprisingly well in melee against my Knights of the Blazing Sun this game. And you can see he uses that nice snipe ability to get VOLKMAR down just a little bit more. VOLKMAR also isn't at his healing cap yet, so things are looking relatively up for me in that respect. And some of these Glade Guards back here are routing. They only have 8 models left, so VOLKMAR is doing a nice little drive-by there. But yeah, there's that Lamentation ability. Look at the damage it did. That was actually maybe a good, 7 to 10%. And the Branch Wraith, of course, is getting in. I think the Branch Wraith is actually susceptible to fire as well. So VOLKMAR definitely viable in this particular matchup. I actually enjoyed him a lot this game, and of course his buffs were quite helpful, but something that's going to be very tough is he does have this healthy group of Glade Guard here who still have about 30% of their ammo, and he does have a Waystalker, so he has this just constant pressure. So I'm trying to regroup right here, and it's just tough because he just keeps peppering me. I can't get a second to breathe and just relax and you get my troops together, and I'm still just taking fire constantly. So you can see I have to immediately, as soon as I'm regrouped, move all my forces up. I still have a Light Wizard, but pretty much at this point I had expended most of my Winds of Magic. So what would have been really nice here is if I would have been able to net this front line and then get around the back on Jerthu, who you can see is at 682 HP. And some of my Knights of the Blazing Sun thankfully came back. I tried to finish off these Dryads here, and it looks like they broke. But my guys are also shaken. They're at 1 leadership at the moment. Now they go to -13, probably just because Big Pop is nearby. But I do get a Fireball effect. It hits Jerthu, but it actually only did 100 damage. So very disappointed in that. And it turns out I did have some Winds of Magic, but definitely did not go well. So my troops are advancing in. I'm trying to sneak around the flank, but the Waystalker and those what are those things called? The Glade Guards are just continuing to pressure VOLKMAR, and it's definitely a very, very tough situation. So I figure, it's the time. I pull in some swordsmen from auxiliary, get them in there, but Jerthu quickly cleaves half of them just immediately. And I get my heroic units in here. It looks like there's a bombardment ability of some sort. It must be VOLKMAR, yeah. But still, those Waystalkers and those Branch Wraiths, they're not pushovers. They're pretty good. I mean, the Branch Wraith itself has 330 weapon strength. So against all these low troops, I tried one last stand to get in there and get Jerthu, but he is not having that. He just pimp slaps that Bright Wizard, sends him running, and that is all she wrote. So very, very well played on my opponent's part. That was a super fun game. And definitely, learning a lot about the Empire versus Wood Elves matchup. I think the Swordsmen are a pretty good choice. I don't know what I would change in retrospect, because I'd been facing off against a lot of, Wood Elf players who had very tree-heavy builds. They would bring the Tree Can, they would bring, Lifeblood, and have it, kind of like that Death Star build I showed you guys a few days ago. So I saw a few games like that, so I feel like bringing Halberdiers, maybe cut one group of Halberdiers and bring a little more utility in my army would have been helpful. I did like the Light Wizard. I felt like he was really clutch because you guys saw that was a very, very close game as is. And just imagine if these Glade Riders had been able to run rampant, and had kited my Knights of the Blazing Sun around. So it was very well played and definitely looking forward to learning more. So Knights of the Blazing Sun obviously did really, really well for me that game. They were able to get back into the Glade Guards. They were able to cut down the Glade Riders. So I felt they were a pretty good choice. Tattersouls did pretty well, as well as Sigmar's Sons. Liked both of those guys in this matchup. And the Swordsmen, of course, they did their job. They took a beating. I might cut the Empire Captain. Again, without the potions, that he doesn't have that kind of same utility. And perhaps bringing something like a Witch Hunter might have been useful for accusation, and maybe that focused armor-piercing attack on Dirthu would have been good. So definitely a lot to look forward to in terms of experimentation. So again, well played to my opponent, Nice Old Lady 707. I look forward to seeing you again on ladder, and I hope you guys enjoyed that Empire cast. Have an excellent night, and take care.